to my little kitchen, and today I'm going to show you how to do something which lots of people seem to think is quite difficult, but it's not. And it's to make pasta. And pasta, believe it or not, is literally just egg and flour. Now if you can get 00 flour, which is traditionally what pasta is made from, then brilliant. But to be quite honest, people can't even get normal flour, never mind any speciality flour nowadays. So I've got bread flour in here that's strong bread flour, so it's got more gluten in it. You might well use just plain flour for this if you wanted to. It won't be quite as nice, but it would do just as well. And for the mums out there who don't like mess, sorry. So what I'm going to do is I've got 100 grams of this flour and I am going to pour it on the table. Now when we're at school and we make pasta, we either use a food processor or sometimes, and that's to make the dough, and sometimes we use a pasta machine, a special pasta machine to roll the pasta out. But my pasta machine is still at school and I have got a food processor, but some of you might not. So we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. So what you can see is I've made like a little sandcastle with my flour here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a finger and I'm going to make a hole in the middle of it. And the hole's got to be kind of as big as the egg, if you like. So some people like to do this by literally putting the egg in and moving it around a bit. Either way, it's important that the walls are solid because I'm going to now crack the egg straight into it. Again, sorry mums. So in goes the egg. We don't need any seasoning, we don't need anything really. That is literally just what pasta is, egg and flour. Sometimes people put colourings in there. Beetroot can be used to make that red pasta that you might have seen, and sometimes spinach is used to make the green pasta. Sometimes even squid ink is used to make a black pasta. Not my particular favourite, but there you go. Using our fork, what we're going to do is, you know when you eat and you put your fork that way, well we want our fork this way. Think of it as beans, baked beans or peas that way, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pierce the inside, and you're going to use a combination of hands and quick wits. I have hands, quick wits is arguable, and I'm going to try and mix it in with the flour from the inside out, and if it breaks the wall, then I'm going to try and fix it as quick as I can. So, here we go. Okay, we have the dropped. Okay, I saved it, we're okay. So I'm just whisking it, look. And every time I whisk it, it just brings a little bit more of the flour in that's around the edge. And I might not need all the flour. Depends really on the size of your egg. Not all eggs are the same. I think mine are medium this week because that's just all I could get. So you just have to kind of go with the flow. You can see now that what I've got in the middle looks a little bit like kind of cake mix. It's quite runny. That's clearly not going to make pasta, so let's go ahead and mix in a little bit more of the flour. I've switched my technique now from whisking to kind of smooshing along the table like this. Those of you that are a bit mess phobic, and I know that I am also the same when my children have a go at things, you can do this in a shallow bowl, the kind of thing that you would eat pasta in when it's cooked actually, or like a kind of a salad bowl. But you need to be able to get your fork round, and if it's a mixing bowl of the traditional variety, what you find is that all the flour gets incorporated and it's too dry. So we're getting somewhere now. I can see that it's getting thicker. I'm just pushing the flour back in. That's it. Oh, we're getting there now. So now it's looking a bit like wallpaper paste. For those of you old enough to remember this, old kids like, what? take that off, get rid of that just for now, and now we're going to go in with our hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of put enough flour on it to be able to handle it, because it's still really sticky, look, and it'll just get all over your fingertips. Fingertips here are better opposed to all of your hand. And I'm just going to start folding it back in on itself. I'm kind of kneading it, and I will be kneading it properly in a moment, but for the time being all I'm looking for is I'm looking for the texture of it to be right. And as with lots of things that involve a dough, it's kind of a Play-Doh type thing that we're looking for. In fact, it's a bit stiffer than that for pasta. It's more like blue tack, I would say. Okay, and there we have a pasta dough. Look at all that flour that was left over. I might need that in a minute, so I'm just going to push that to one side. And it's a good idea at this point, from a cleaning up perspective, before it's kind of dried on and goes like the strongest glue ever, to just rub that off all the little dry bits. And we're not going to use that to knead, so just push that to one side. Just helps with the clear up a bit. Okay, so now we've got our pasta dough, and it's stretchy, but it's not that stretchy, look. And that's because we need to activate the gluten. Inside a wheat seed, which is where flour comes from, there are two proteins called glutenin and gliadin. And these proteins just sit there doing absolutely nothing all the time within the seed until either the seed is milled into flour and someone adds a liquid, or if it's in nature, the seed drops onto the floor, the outside of it decomposes, and Mother Nature very cleverly lets some water in and the seed starts to grow. And at that point, the glutenin and the gliadin form together and make gluten, which you've probably heard of because some people are something called gluten intolerant or celiac. And this gluten does a very special job for pasta and for bread in that it's kind of elastic. It's like chewing gum. And so if you were to put a piece of chewing gum in your mouth, a tablet of chewing gum, it wouldn't be stretchy straight away, but actually once you've been chewing it for a little while, it's really stretchy. And what we're doing here is we're looking to activate that gluten so that we can get some stretch in our dough, and that makes our dough nice and tender when we eat it. In fact, in Italy, when they cook pasta, they cook it until it's something called al dente, which means to the tooth in Italian. And that actually means that it's still got a little bit of bite. And without the gluten, that wouldn't be there. It would just be entirely soft. So you can tell a good pasta, if any of you have ever been out to eat, remember that when we used to be able to go out, and been out to eat to a nice Italian, their pasta will be freshly made and you'll be able to taste that, well, the texture of the gluten. You won't be able to taste it, but you'll be able to feel the texture of the gluten because it will have that sort of spring in it. So, while I've been talking a load of rubbish, I've also been kneading. And if you've ever watched me make other things like bread and stuff, I have a way of kneading where I use the heel of my hand here and just literally push it along the table and use the friction between the table and the dough to achieve some kind of stretch. There's lots of ways to do it, it's no right or wrong way. You can pull it back and fold it over like this, all sorts of things. If you are making this in a food processor where you've blitzed it up, that kind of does a little bit of the kneading for you, and so you'll find that you don't have to do this quite as much. But the longer that you knead this for now, the better your pasta will be. So it's how much energy you've got left, and I have to say I'm losing the will to live a little bit along the whole kneading route as we're talking. Although it is good for my muscles. So, I mean, even with the most slight amount of kneading that I've done there, you can see it's changed. It's smoother, for definite. It has stretch in it now, where it didn't before. Not to that extent anyway. And so if you kept doing that for another 5 minutes or so, you will find that your pasta is absolutely Perfect. Now, moving all the flour out of the way just for now, we've got to shape it. And if I'd got a pasta machine with me now, that would be amazing, because I could just put this pasta through and it would just roll it out into a long thin strip. And literally that much pasta would make kind of, you know, the width of this table. It would be huge and very, very thin. And I don't think I'm going to be able to get it that thin at home with a rolling pin. But nonetheless, I'm going to have a go. So we want a little bit of flour on the top and the bottom, just like as if you were rolling out pastry or whatever. And we're just going to go ahead and just roll it out. If you haven't got a rolling pin, a bottle of wine will do if you disinfect the outside of it. Clearly I've got no bottles of wine in my house. I've got gin bottles, but they're square, and that won't do. So yeah, a bottle of wine would do, or like, even if you've got like foil like this that's round, and you can use that, and then you can discard the outer layer when you've done. So over the last few minutes as I've been speaking, I've got a very rubbish dough here, and it's proper thick. And if you cooked it like that, it tastes a bit like a shoe. So you've got to get some weight behind it. Luckily, I have weight, so I'm going to stand up, and I'm really going to put a bit of effort in now and really press. I know you can't see my face, it's probably best. And it's important that it doesn't stick to the table at this point, so I'm just going to keep turning it and adding more flour. And I want it to be about the size of like a baking tray type size. I know that this is really, really bad video, because all you can see is this part of me. Okay, keep going, keep going. This bit's good for your workout. But this is what little Italian mamas used to do. There was no help with rolling then. Oh, keep going, Mrs. Code. Oh, gets me frustrations out on this pasta. Okay, it's not that bad now, actually. I'm just gonna try and do that end bit a bit more. Yes. Okay. This is what we've got. Granted, it is not the shape of a baking sheet, but it's around the length. If you can square it up a bit, you'll get more pasta out of it. You'll see why in a minute. But the thinner you can get it, the better, basically. So once we've got that, then I'm going to come back to the flour that I kept a bit of. I'm going to flour both sides. And then I'm going to take a really sharp knife, the type of knife that little children shouldn't have on their own. So at this point, if you're making this on your own, you need to go get your mum and dad to help you with this bit. I'm just going to cut a tiny bit off at this side, because I want to show you something else in a minute. So I'm just going to keep that over there. But the easiest way to do this, most definitely, is to roll it up and slice it. And what you get is something along the lines of tagliatelle. So if you roll it up now, making sure that it's floured so that it doesn't stick to itself, like that. And because it's a bit thicker than it should be, I wouldn't go chunky, or you'll find that you end up with not particularly nice texture. And what you get is, you get that, which is like a tagliatelle. And if you don't want to cook it straight away, if you do, it's like 3 minutes, boiling water, plenty of salt, should be as salty as the sea, doesn't go into the pasta, not all of it anyway, it just gives it a nice texture and taste. But if you don't want to cook it straight away, what I'd advise you to do is unravel the little pieces and just leave them somewhere apart until the heat of the room, the ambient temperature of the room, has just dried it out enough to not stick together. Because just to give you an indication, I made this a little bit earlier, and I put it all in a bowl like that just to see, just to show you what I mean. And if I now lift that out, You can see that it's stuck together in parts, and it will, if you put that in the water, it will boil together like that and not be quite as tender as you would have liked. So actually it's better to let it dry a bit or do it straight away, but never leave it sort of crumpled up in a little bowl. So that's how to do tagliatelle, or maybe linguine, dependent on how you've cut it. And then the other thing that you can do is you can cut it into, and I'm just going to move that out of the way for a second, you can cut these pieces into rectangles about as big as a matchbox. And a pizza wheel can do this job as well, when it's just one layer. When it's cutting through a rolled up version, you will need a big knife. But if you make yourself rectangles that are about as big as a matchbox, as I say, and then concertina the middle, I'm just going to bring this in so you can see, like so, and then press like that to seal, and then leave it to dry like that. What you've got is those little bow tie pastas, which is kind of cool. The other thing that you can do is you can leave it literally as that and use it to make lasagna. Or, if you fancy, you can find some filling of some sort. I'm going to now pretend that that's a filling. It's not, it's the screwed up bow tie. And you can, and by filling I mean you could use leftover bolognese sauce. If you kind of just use the meat bit rather than loads of sauce, you could use cream cheese, you could use mushrooms that you might have cooked in some garlic with some cream. You could use chicken that you've left over from a Sunday dinner that you've put into a food processor and blitzed up a bit. Anything like that. And you can make ravioli, and it doesn't have to be fancy, honestly, it really doesn't. And what you do is you just put your filling in, like so, and then using a little bit of egg or water even, you wet the edges like that, and then just fold it over. The only important thing that you've got to make sure is that you press out all the air, because as it cooks it will expand and it will let the filling out if it pokes a hole in the actual pasta itself. So that actually is pasta within pasta now, so clearly that's not a nice ravioli to eat because it's just going to be dough. But if you had something else inside it, that would be a really nice thing to eat. The last thing that I'm going to show you is a tortellini, and a tortellini, if you might remember, is it looks a bit like, I think, one of those serviettes that have been folded up for you at a posh restaurant. And a tortellini starts out life as a triangle. Once again, I'm just going to pretend that I've got some filling by using a little bit of dough. And what we do to the tortellini, no, it doesn't start out as a triangle, or does it start out as a triangle? No, it does not start out as a triangle. It starts out as a square and you fold it into a triangle. There you go, I knew it was something like that. So it starts out as a square, you put your filling inside, and this time you do wet the edges and fold it into the triangle. That's the thing that I was trying to remember. Like this. Again, squeeze all the air out. That's right. Like this, they can be bigger or smaller. And then you want to put it underneath your thumb, like this, and fold that side over and that side over, and give it a little seal there, and then that bit there just gets turned back over. Now that's a bit of a giant one, but you can see the idea that they're little tortellini. You can freeze those quite nicely, and they are beautiful to serve as like a starter or whatever. Got a bit carried away here. Pasta, all types of things you can do with pasta. I was really interested to see an artist that was working with pasta by colouring them in lots of different rainbow colours and making polka dot pasta and all sorts. But I suppose it's a means to an end, isn't it? And if you can't get pasta in the shops, now you know how to make your own.